Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea from Game Informer, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. In the first episode of 2023, we gave our initial impressions of Fire Emblem Engage and Sports Story. Today, we're going to revisit those two games with our final reviews of each title, plus a few other recent titles we've been checking out. Of course, to do all of that, I had to invite Wesley LeBlanc back on to put an end cap on both of those games. Wesley, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. We are coming up on the end of this week. This week has felt like it has dragged. I don't know if it's just me or
yes.
I don't know. I've talked to a couple of people who are like a couple days ago, they were like, it's only Wednesday? How is that even possible?
Yep. That's so funny because I have like a group chat with some friends and like we've all been like, how is this week still happening? And it's still only Thursday.
And some days or some weeks it just flies by.
Yep.
But this one, it seems like it's a universal drag week. So I am glad it's coming to an end. Personally, I have a lot of plans this weekend, and we have some Nintendo news to talk about, believe it or not.
Woo.
It's been pretty dry so far in 2023 as far as like actual news is concerned. And as is Ceremony West, we're kicking off this episode with some Pokemon news. This is kind of Pokemon news, kind of Nintendo-wide, kind of industry-wide, if I'm being honest. But the NPD, who tracks sales for United States in particular, they put out their end-of-year report for 2022, and we now know the top-selling games of the year in terms of overall dollar sales, aka how much money they brought in. So, according to the NPD group, Pokemon claimed both top spots on the Switch. So, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet took the number 1 spot, followed by Pokemon Legends Arceus in the number 2 spot. And then Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was number 3, Kirby and the Forgotten Land was number 4, and then Nintendo Switch Sports rounded out the top 5. And just for full industry perspective, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet was the 6th best-selling game of 2022 overall, and that is behind Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 at number 1, Elden Ring, Madden NFL 23, God of War Ragnarok, and Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. And then also,
interesting.
I know. Well, that's a multi-platform release, which automatically gets in. It also sold extremely well on Switch. I think it was also like number 8 on the Switch list, if I'm not mistaken.
Interesting. I didn't know it was that big of a game. I mean, I know it's a big game because it's Lego and Star Wars, but I didn't know it hit that big.
Yeah, it was it also came out pretty early on in the year, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it, give it a lot more time. Whereas like something like Modern Warfare 2 or God of War Ragnarok, they hit in November. So that didn't give them much time, but they still made it into the top 5. And also the thing about Nintendo is that does not include digital sales. Some of these include digital sales, so it kind of skews the numbers a little bit because I think, that digital part is becoming a larger and larger chunk every single year. Nintendo doesn't share that information outside of their quarterly reports that they put out every 3 months. So the Switch ended up being the top selling console of 2022 once again. But do any of these numbers and any of these like rankings surprise you?
I mean, Pokemon on the top 2 spots is not really surprising, especially for a year that didn't have. I mean, Pokemon were the big hitters for Nintendo this year. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe being number 3 it shouldn't be wild because every year that game just, I don't know, it's at like 50 million sold now or something.
Yeah. It might have even surpassed that by now. I think last quarterly report, it was at 48.1, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
so
it
might
be
have passed 50 now.
And it's just wild that, that game continues to sell. It seems like if you buy a Switch today, you get Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, like no question about it. Otherwise, I don't know how this game continues to it's outselling other big first-party games like Kirby and, everything except Pokemon.
Yeah. And I mean, it's one of the top-selling games of all time at this point. Like, it just keeps going. And, of course, that's aided by the fact that they started releasing DLC for this almost decade-old game, if you count the Wii U version, last year. So, we're doubling the number of courses as a part of the Booster Course Pass. And that's just an incredible boost to a very strong selling title already. And of course, like, Mario Kart is the game that you get no matter what, because that's the type of game that, like, if you're playing alone, you play that. If you have friends coming over, that's the game. Like, I went to a Christmas party late last month, and you know what? As I was leaving, this was not a gaming group or anything. They busted out the Switch and were playing 4-player Mario Kart. So
that's amazing. That's like the commercial.
It speaks to, I mean, they weren't playing it on a rooftop because I'm in Minnesota in December, but that's just, it speaks to the power of this game and this franchise. And if you want to talk more about Mario Kart, I did do a full retrospective with Kyle Hilliard a few months back to celebrate the anniversary of the franchise. If you're a fan and you missed that episode, I highly recommend going back and listening to that because we dug deep into the history of that series. But there's some other games that came out last year that didn't make this list. However, they all got title updates this week, and they're all pretty well-liked games. The first one, we'll start with the Nintendo first-party one, Splatoon 3. They just put out a free update. This is a game that is meant to be a living, breathing title, and they've kept it as such. And it got just a weapon balancing update. So nothing really to talk about too in-depth here, but just basically tweaking everything, making sure everything feels right. And I'm glad they're keeping up on it, right? Because this could be a game that like they just kind of threw out there and said, hey, this is the way the game plays, this is the meta, like deal with it. But I'm glad they're kind of keeping up with it.
Yeah, same. I mean, it's theoretically the last Splatoon we'll have on Switch, probably. So it's nice to see that they're hopefully going to support it till whatever's next in that franchise.
Now, Wes, I forget entirely what your impressions were of this game. I know we were all very excited for it, but Cult of the Lamb, what were your thoughts on that game when it came out?
I liked it a lot. I gave it a 8 out of 10 here at Game Informer. It was it didn't really nail the village building vibes I wanted, because you're not really building a village like the game kind of says you are. You're more so building a factory that manufactures pain and poop and just bad things.
Just so much poop.
Yeah, so much. But it is still really great. I think I came out loving the combat more than the rest of the game, which is not what I expected when I went in. But if you haven't played Cult of the Lamb, it's one I would recommend for sure.
And now it's even better because they put out a free title update this week that adds a ton of quality of life improvements, which is something that I think that this series this game was a few quality of life improvements away from being one of my absolute favorite games of last year.
Agreed. Yeah. Especially one of the biggest features they added, which is the mass blessings.
Oh,
that
yeah.
is so nice.
that takes up so much time. And I kind of fell off after, I don't know, maybe 10 hours of this game. And the mass blessings would absolutely make it so I would go back. So I'm excited for that. They also added auto cooking, auto fishing, controller rebinding, and cult renaming, which I don't know. I just called mine Cult of the Lamb. I didn't get too creative with it. Did you call yours anything creative?
Gosh, I can't remember what I called it. I did name it something, but I don't remember now. Dang it.
That's okay. And did you check out Nobody Saves the World?
I started on Xbox, but I started it, I think it was my next game I decided to play after Cult of the Lamb, if I recall correctly, or at least close to it. And it was so similar in the way it feels that I kind of jumped off, which isn't really fair to Nobody Saves the World, but I was just looking for something different. They control very similarly. I
mean, it's almost like if you were to jump from one giant open world RPG into another giant open world RPG, it's like, all right, this is too much right now. So exactly. I get that.
Yeah,
it's just like you need some variety in your life, unless like you're just like one of those like one genre gamers. Like, I know some people who they only play Souls-likes now, or they only play first person shooters, and it's like, I get it, that's your thing, but like for me, like I almost need like the food pyramid of my gaming experience. I need the well balanced diet.
Yeah, Souls-likes for me are at the top. Like one of those a year and I'm good. Otherwise, I think life will get too punishing.
Souls-like are like an allergy for me, where it's like I go to eat. I'm like, okay, maybe this is the time that I won't get sick. And then every time I do it, I'm like, okay, this is fun. Okay, I hate this now. That was my experience with Bloodborne. I loved it for like the first 10 hours. And then I just immediately was like, okay, I'm done. And then Elden Ring was very much the same way, where I was loving it. I was loving exploring the world, and then it got to a point where I was just like super frustrated with it. So yeah, Souls-likes are not my cup of tea. However, Nobody Saves the World got a surprise title update for the game's anniversary. It's called the Impossible Dungeon Update, and it adds a new dungeon and a new dino form. And this is a game that I've been told over and over again I need to check out, and I bought it. And it, by the way, also part of this is like this anniversary celebration is I think discounted 40% on platforms. So that's another little incentive for people who haven't checked it out yet to dive in. But this is a game that I've been recommended that I should check out. I bought it and I just haven't had the time. It's up there with Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I went and bought that because I was like, oh, I'll play this over the Christmas break. Everything's kind of slowed down. The industry kind of like steps back. There's not a whole lot of news coming out. And I bought Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and I didn't even fire it up because I was too busy playing other games and too busy like hanging out with family and everything. Yeah, unimportant stuff.
Yeah, why would you hang out with family? What the heck?
But yeah, I do have intentions to play this, and maybe it's like Cult of the Lamb, where it's like by the time I do get back to it, it'll be something that's like, this is a substantially better game because they made all these tweaks and changes.
Yeah, it's always funny being in the industry because a lot of times we play games pre-release, and then, sometimes a month later, the game is demonstrably better because of updates. And then in instances, a year later, they get a nice big anniversary update and the game's much better. So
what's the biggest instance of that where you've played a game and then you're like, all right, I finished that game, I'm probably never going to play it again, and then they put out an update, like a giant update, and you're like, oh, well, now I have to go play it because it's so much better or so much different?
I think let me think. I don't know if it's go ahead.
I was gonna say, while you think, I can give you mine, but it sounds like you have one.
Yeah, it's not the biggest one ever, but it's the one that came to my mind immediately was funny enough, Elden Ring. I had platinum that game. I put like 150 hours in that game shortly after release because I did get code early. And then a month later, they had fixed a bunch of problems I had ran into. They did like some buffs and some nerfs and all kinds. Like they did a ton of balance tweaking that would have completely changed the way I played the game. And then, I have friends a few weeks later who are like, have you tried this weapon? Blah, it's insane. It's the best weapon. And I'm like, no, I didn't even give it a try because it just didn't work for me in the game, but they buffed it and now it's great and a whole thing. But yeah. What about you?
For me, it's Final Fantasy 15.
Ooh.
So, I played it right at launch, maybe even before launch. I finished it because I remember we got some codes for that as well to do coverage and whatnot. And I finished it and I was like, okay, I really liked that game. And I'm a bigger fan of Final Fantasy 15 than I think a lot of people are. Like I think that game is amazing. Yeah, and I do want to replay it at some point. I actually started a replay, I think, in 2021, and then I just kind of fell off, unfortunately, or got distracted by other games, as is typically the case. And they did that Chapter 13 rework where like it's completely different, and then they added all these DLC things. And it's a bummer they didn't get to finish their like DLC plans that they had, because like, they did the DLC for all the party characters. And then they did one for, what's his name, Arden?
Arden, yeah. And they were supposed to do one for, I forget her name.
Luna Freya?
Yeah, and...
Which sucks because she desperately needed some fleshing out.
Yes, for sure.
But, like, I remember that speaking of anniversaries, one of the funniest but also saddest things that, like, a company has ever done to celebrate an anniversary. They're like, all right, we're having this big Final Fantasy 15 anniversary stream. Square Enix did this. And Hajime Tabata, who was the director of Final Fantasy 15, also the man who's largely credited for saving what was originally Final Fantasy Versus 13, changing it into Final Fantasy 15 and making it so that game finally came out. He came out and he's like, hey, I'm leaving the company, and also all the DLC is canceled.
Yeah,
it's like, oh,
brutal.
Wow, what a great anniversary stream, guys. Thanks. That was the game that, they made a lot of great changes to that. And when I went back, even in the first 7 hours, I think I probably played in my attempted replay in 2021, it definitely felt better than it did in whenever that game came out. 2020.
Yeah, just fixing that Chapter 13 that's such a big fix. That chapter sucked so much at launch.
It really did. But you know what other game is getting a lot of updates and is continually tempting me to go back? Dead Cells.
Ooh, yeah.
Yesterday, when people are listening to this, we got a new trailer for the Dead Cells Castlevania crossover DLC that was announced at the Game Awards, which, by the way, when they announced this, I was like, yep, sold. Going back to that. Yep. Dead Cells takes such heavy inspiration from the Castlevania franchise in general. And I think it's arguably one of the better Metroidvania games that we've gotten in the past several years. And, now that they're actually doing an official licensed Castlevania crossover, I could not be more on board. It's the developer claims it's the biggest DLC for Dead Cells to date. And looking at the Steam page, it adds 2 new biomes, 14 weapons from the Castlevania series, and a ton of Castlevania enemies to fight. And then they said all these weapons that are coming over have been tweaked to reflect the faster paced combat of Dead Cells. And then there will also be 3 new battles against boss characters like Dracula and Death, a new storyline featuring Richter Belmont, 20 new outfits, 51 original Castlevania tracks, and 12 classic Castlevania tracks reimagined in the style of Dead Cells music.
That's so cool.
This sounds like it rules. Dead Cells is one of those games where I love the gameplay, and I played it so much just because the gameplay is so good, and the music is awesome, by the way, in both Castlevania and Dead Cells. So I'm so excited for the fusion of that for those 12 classic tracks. But the roguelite format is always such a hard sell for me. And this is one of those games that has kind of transcended it. I still enjoy it, but it still frustrates the heck out of me when I get to further than I've ever made it before, and then I die, and so much of my progress is lost. I know there's some carryover. That's the essence of a roguelite, but it's just it's a tough sell for me. But Dead Cells, you're the closest that maybe a game has ever come for me being okay, I like this a lot despite the roguelite format. And Castlevania is one of the formative experiences in my gaming life, the original Castlevania on NES. So I'm all in. I'm definitely going to come back to this when this comes out. So are you going to be checking this out at all? Are you a Dead Cells fan?
So I've actually never played Dead Cells. It's it's always been a game I need to check out. But I mean, once I heard Bloody Tears in the Game Awards trailer, I was like, all right, whatever this is, I'm playing it. So should be my first start to Dead Cells is this Dracula or Castlevania update.
I mean, honestly, I think you would love it. It has some of the best 2D Metroidvania-esque combat. And, it's mostly melee, and it feels so good. And the music is great. That's why I think I'm so excited. Like my favorite video game music will always give me so much motivation to play a game. If somebody's like, hey, we got this game and it has a Sonic crossover, I'm like, okay, that's cool. But then they're like, oh, but we have 15 reimagined classic Sonic song. I'm like, okay, I'm definitely checking that out now. So
same.
This music is such a huge motivator for me, but also the fact that the game plays so well. Castlevania, at its best, is just a superb franchise. And, we don't have long to wait for this because it comes out apparently first quarter of this year. So that is when I'm going to dive into it. And this is one of those games that I own on multiple platforms. I played it first, I want to say on Xbox. And then, of course, when it came to Switch, I bought it there. So that's just a kind of a glimpse into how much I like this game. So definitely
it's 7 years old now at this point, right? Yeah. It came out in 2016. That's so wild to me. I probably missed it because 2016 was my senior year of college, and I don't remember playing mini games at all that year. But gosh, that's crazy. It's been around that long. And I still hear praise today about it. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And we have one last piece of news here. And this one comes via NintendoLife.com. They reported this, the past couple of years have taken a heavy toll, Wes. There's a lot going on in the world. And here's one thing that I did not expect to hit me so hard. Some members of the media were able to visit the new Super Nintendo World location in Universal Studios Hollywood. And, just like my review and Alex Van Aken's review of the Osaka, Japan location, the reviews have been glowing, very much glowing. People are like, yeah, this is amazing. And I'm assuming a lot of these people haven't visited the Osaka location of Universal Studios to visit Super Nintendo World out there. So, they probably have a similar experience as I did. However, while the rest of the park seems like it's very much a one-to-one recreation of Super Nintendo World in Japan, it looks like Toadstool's Cafe, which is called Kinopio's Cafe in Japan, came with a pretty hefty downgrade.
Ugh. Brutal.
So this news comes, again, via Nintendo Life from Twitter user Matt Acuna, who, by the way, has the absolute best Twitter handle imaginable for somebody named Matt Acuna. His Twitter handle is Acuna Matata.
That's amazing.
Best
I
Twitter
love that.
handle of the day for sure. But first up, the Mushroom Pizza Bowl, the Power Star Teriyaki Chicken, the Bowser Shell Steak. I forget what the actual names are. Those are my recalls of them. Those are what we all got when we were out there. Those were our 3 main course meals that Alex and I split and were enjoying very much. They're simply not on the menu. They just aren't on the menu, according to this Twitter user. And then the biggest crime appears to be Princess Peach's cake, which Alex and I tried to order because it looks incredible. It's the multi-layered cake like you play on like Mario Party 1 when you play like the Peach's birthday cake. They were sold out of it in Japan. So unfortunately, we didn't get to try it there. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just try it when I go to the Hollywood location.
You thought?
I thought, but it looks like it's just a little cupcake with a crown on it now. It's not even a full cake. It's just a little tiny cupcake.
So that's so strange. So it's just the spirit is there, but they made it not as great.
But it also doesn't look anything like Peach's cake now. It's just a little like red cake or little red cupcake, whereas like the Peach's birthday cake is white and it's, you know, it's meant for like multiple people. But this cupcake, it's very underwhelming. It just looks like something that I would take out of my oven and then, you know, take like a little piece of edible, like an edible Princess Peach crown and put it on top. And it's nothing special, really. Whereas like if you ordered Princess Peach's cake from the pictures that we saw, and then, you know, the woman explained to us that they were sold out, but it looked like it was an event if somebody ordered that. It looked like it would turn heads. Like when like they bring out the fajitas and they're sizzling at the restaurant, everybody's head turns and looks at it. This looks like it would have been that. You know, I don't think it sizzles, but you know, it probably was definitely an attention grabber, and we were hoping to get that to take some pictures of it and video and B-roll and everything. And unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to. And now it sounds like I'll never get a chance to do it unless I find myself in Osaka again.
I'm sure you will one day, but that is a bummer that it's not happening in Hollywood. I'm going to hold out for Orlando. Maybe the Universal Studios down where I'm near will have the proper meals. So they took off those 3 great sounding meals from the menu. Did they replace them, or is it just missing 3? Like it's just 3 less meals?
I don't know. I have incomplete data on that. I'm just going off this guy's Twitter thread that he posted. But it seems like there's other stuff that they also don't have. I think they might have been like kids items themed after Mario and Luigi. I think I don't know what they were exactly. I didn't even see them on the menu when I went to Japan back in October. But you know, Super Nintendo World, by my account, by Alex's account, by everybody who went to the Hollywood one, absolutely rules. It's just the best time. That Mario Kart ride in particular is incredible, but this is kind of a bummer.
Since you've been to the one in Osaka, is the Yoshi ride cool? Because I think the Hollywood one is not getting that as well.
It's the least impressive part. It's just like an animatronic slow moving tour, basically. Like you just ride through a very slow people mover, basically.
Okay.
And you get to see like up close animatronics of Baby Mario and Yoshi and different like Yoshi's Island.
Are they like
enemies.
super impressive animatronics, or are they just kind of like classic theme park ones? Okay,
cool. The entire park is super impressive, especially the animatronics. Like everything is like, even up close, they look incredible. So like,
so awesome.
I don't think there's anything wrong with the Yoshi ride. It's just like, you know, after I waited in line for 90 minutes and then got on it and I just rode through this very, very slow moving, basically like, oh, I could have just walked through this and it would have been just as cool. It gave you a good view of the park, but yeah, I think that by not having that, like they need another ride at some point. I think they are building, at least in the Orlando one, I think they're building a Donkey Kong roller coaster.
Yeah. So cool.
But yeah, like, I don't know. The Yoshi ride isn't that was maybe my least favorite part of the entire park, aside from, you know, waiting in line. But does this food thing discourage you at all from visiting the one out in Hollywood?
Probably not too much. I didn't know that those 3 items you mentioned earlier were not, I didn't even know those were on the menu, because I had watched a video recently on YouTube about the menu at the Hollywood one. And it seemed like pretty standard theme park food. Like nothing really stood out to me. The meals were, I think it was like a fire flower, spaghetti and meatballs, which, I mean, I don't want to judge, but I don't know who's eating spaghetti and meatballs at a theme park on a hot day. That's not for me. And then they had like a Luigi burger, which was like a chicken burger, and then just like a Mario hamburger. So from what I saw from the video, the food wasn't like anything too wild looking, but I don't know. I don't really go to theme parks for the meals like that necessarily. So
Well, here's the thing. When Alex and I went to Super Nintendo World, we ordered those because those looked like the coolest, most unique items that they had. And now those three are the ones that they're not bringing over. Plus another one. I think there was another one that they're like, oh yeah, we're not bringing this one. It was like another pasta, which, we did not order. But it's just funny that like 3 of the 4 items were like the ones that we deemed were the most impressive and the coolest looking like homages to Mario and Nintendo. And those are the ones they chose not to bring over. Plus the most impressive thing, which was the Princess Peach cake.
That is such a bummer.
Truly, we have strayed further from God's light. But that's all the news for this week. We are going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we are going to give our final review impressions of a few recent games, including Fire Emblem Engage. We will be right back. Today marks the release of the first major game of 2023, and just like in 2022, that game happens to be a Switch exclusive from Nintendo. Fire Emblem Engage is out today, and while we got some early impressions of the game on the first show of this year, I had to get Wes's final impressions now that he has rolled credits and rendered his final verdict. So Wes, we already had a pretty in-depth conversation a couple weeks ago about Fire Emblem Engage when the preview embargo came up. So how have your impressions changed? Actually, let's start with this. For people who didn't listen to that episode, give us a very brief, kind of elevator pitch for what Fire Emblem Engage delivers.
So Fire Emblem Engage, unlike Three Houses, is a combat first, everything else second strategy RPG. If Three Houses is what pulled you in, and it's those social systems that you really enjoyed, those aren't really present in Engage. And I'm someone who loved Three Houses for those reasons and more. But it's a big but, is that Engage puts as much emphasis on its combat and its like battlefield strategy mechanics as Three Houses did to its social mechanics. And I think it succeeds just as much on that front. So I wasn't super familiar with Fire Emblem before Three Houses. It was my first one, but I know that some longtime fans didn't like Three Houses because of its emphasis on social stuff and its less emphasized combat. This is kind of the opposite. So I feel like this is the game for more longtime Fire Emblem fans that want that, classic strategy RPG combat Fire Emblem is known for. I discovered by Engage that I think I just love Fire Emblem in any form because I loved Three Houses and I loved Engage just as much. Engage is, if I had a top 5 list of Switch games, I think I would just put Engage and Three Houses in the same spot with like a slash between them because they're both giving me so much of what I love. And yeah, I'm just really, really happy with how Engage turned out. So going to, when we talked about it previously on the show, I mentioned that the combat was really good. And in my review, which is on Game Informer, I gave it a 9 out of 10. The combat starts terrific and just gets better from there. So I have no issues with the combat really at all. It is a little more convoluted. Well, convoluted is not the right word. It's a little more in-depth and complex than Three Houses, but it introduces its mechanics at such a pace where it's not super overwhelming. I do think Engage would be tough if it was your first Fire Emblem ever because it is doing a lot. So I'd still recommend Three Houses to newcomers. But yeah, the combat in Engage is great. And I think one thing I talked about in the preview a few weeks ago was that the story was kind of by the books and it hadn't really grabbed me yet. The story kind of remains by the books throughout the 50 hours I played, but it did grab me probably halfway, 60% through, because it kind of just really leans into itself. And once you kind of get on terms with what it's doing, it works really well. In my review, I mentioned there's Power Ranger team up moments. And so if you I don't know, I loved watching Power Rangers as a kid. Team up moments, when they do their little risk thing and then they transform and all that stuff was always really cool to me. And so when Fire Emblem really leaned into this team up stuff going on here, I got really engrossed in it. And yeah, it's ultimately one of my favorite Switch games out there now.
Wow. So do you prefer this over Three Houses now?
Gosh, that is so tough. I think overall as a package, I do think Engage is better, and I do think I prefer Engage because it runs better. I don't know why on the last when we previewed it, I was saying it's like on par with Three Houses visuals, and then part of my review process was going back and checking out some of the Three Houses just to see. And man, was I wrong. Engage blows Three Houses out of the water. It's kind of wild. The art style is different, very different. You know, people have made Colgate jokes about the protagonist a lot, and that is funny. But like visually, Engage stands out so much more than Three Houses, just in terms of color and contrast and character design. And it's really cool. The combat is significantly better. The story is not as deep or complex or as mature as Three Houses, but I still liked it just as much. It's really just Engage's social mechanics are a lot less than Three Houses, and I did love that a lot in Three Houses. But I think like if I had to pick one to play right now, it would be Engage, and that's because the majority of what you do in Fire Emblem is combat, and so I'm going to go with the game that has the significantly better combat.
Now, you mentioned that like about you said 60% in, it really started grabbing you.
Yeah.
Was that because the battles got harder, the mechanics got more complicated, or it all started to kind of click? I know you at one point you were concerned that the Engage mechanic was kind of like click to win.
Mm-hmm.
And like a little bit overpowered. Did any of like what happened that caused you to really start to love this combat?
Yeah, so the Engage mechanic, which if you're unfamiliar, Engage is kind of like a big anniversary celebration of Fire Emblem. The conceit of the game is your hero has to collect 12 rings, 12 emblem rings, and inside each emblem ring is the soul of a past Fire Emblem hero. So Marth and Byleth and Celica and Ike and Roy and Lucina, all these other past Fire Emblem heroes return to this game through that. They're not the same exact character, and they are not the character from those games. They are like a manifestation of those characters, kind of. It's they don't really discuss it too much, probably so they don't get too caught up in timeline stuff.
Probably a very good decision to not discuss it too much. Yeah, just don't ask questions. Just enjoy this dumb fun thing.
Yeah, it's a cameo. Enjoy it. It looks cool. Awesome. But yeah, so when you engage on the battlefield, any unit wearing a engage emblem ring can engage at any moment, and that for 3 turns powers them up using the power of the previous Fire Emblem hero. They can usually move a lot farther on the map. They're pretty tough to hit. Like their avoid goes way up, and if they do get hit, they tank the damage much better. And all of their hits are significantly more powerful. Plus, they get a one-time use move that is usually a damage-focused move, but there are some healing ones. And they are pretty incredible. For example, the healing one that I used a lot is Great Sacrifice, and the user drops their HP to 1, but restores every other unit on the battlefield back up to full health, which if you've played powerful Fire Emblem, yeah, you know how helpful that can be. And so when I was using these engage mechanics in the beginning, it was really, like kind of like you mentioned, I hit this button and then I win the match because and it seems like by design, because I'd say about 10 chapters in, and there's like 25 plus chapters, the game does some things and drastically changes, some of the way combat works to kind of make everything more powerful. So it was almost like they were gassing you up, like, oh yeah, Engage is so good, you're great. And then all of a sudden, you can't really rely on it as a crutch anymore. You have to use it strategically. You have to plan out your moves in advance, and you cannot just hit that button whenever something gets hard. Like you really need to think about, okay, I get 3 turns with this. When am I going to use it? Because in the beginning, battles are against a few units. They last 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. But in the second half, I have one battle that went an hour and 37 minutes.
Oh my God.
So like, you cannot.
How did you feel about that, by the way?
I was in it. I loved it. I was just sitting on I felt like a commander, like on a battlefield. Like I have like 30 plus units attacking me, and I have like my 12 units on the field, and I'm like, okay, 12 versus 30. How are we going to do this? And it was such a cool feeling. They're not all that long. I'd say most of them typically are in the 45 minute to an hour range after the halfway point. But I mean, that's pretty long too.
Goodness gracious. I just can't imagine like losing a battle like that and having to start over.
Yes. So something that kind of helps with that is, and I didn't really mention in my review because I didn't get too deep into talking play by play on combat, but there is I forget what it's called. It's like a dragon crystal or divine dragon crystal or something that lets you go back in time on your turns, basically. So if you mess up, you can do that and kind of rewind. I tried my best not to use it just because, I wanted to, play strategically and make sure my moves made sense. But like, if you don't want to spend that much time strategizing what you're doing, you could theoretically see if something works. Oh, that did not work. I lost all my enemies, or I lost all my units, and go back in time and redo those turns. But it's kind of cumbersome. Like, you have to sit through all the animations again. So it's not really something to lean on, but it's there. So I don't know I don't think I lost a single battle completely. Because even if I'm trying to think. Yeah, no, I don't know if I did lose a battle. It's possible. I should note that I played on normal difficulty.
Mhm.
I know a big part of the Fire Emblem fan base starts on hard and then does second playthroughs on like maddening or nightmare, or whatever the hardest difficulty is. That's not really for me, but yeah, I can only imagine how long some of these battles go on those difficulties.
Man, yeah, like something, and we'll talk about this on the next game that we are going to discuss. Something that turns me off from playing a game more than anything is losing a significant amount of progress. Whether that's poor checkpointing, whether that's glitches that cause you to like just have to start over to like a big part. Like that's probably why I don't like the roguelites as much, because
the Souls likes.
Or the Souls likes,
Yeah.
where it feels like, all right, I just put in like an hour of work and now it's all gone. I learned something maybe as like a player, but like no progression whatsoever in my character, or I have to like go back and get it in the case of a Souls-like game. But like, yeah, so that I'm glad to hear there is some sort of, I guess, like do-over mechanic or mulligan almost.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost when you're describing it, it reminds me of like racing games that have like, if you press like the top face button, it'll rewind you back like 10 seconds.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, like in Forza. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so that's really encouraging. So how would you recommend this game to people? Like, would you, if somebody was like, hey, I want to play a Fire Emblem game, I want to play like one of the two newer ones, like, because I have a Switch, like which one would you tell them to go for?
So if you've never played a Fire Emblem game, I would recommend Three Houses. I just think it's an easier onboarding to Fire Emblem. The combat is a lot less challenging and a lot less involved than Engage, and it has the social mechanics, which are really cool to me. I lean into that kind of stuff hard. But if you have played Fire Emblem before, then I think, well, you've probably played Three Houses. So if you liked Three Houses, you'll probably like Engage, unless Three Houses was specifically like, basically, if you played Three Houses and you didn't care about the combat, you only wanted the social stuff, you're not going to like Engage. You need to like Fire Emblem combat if you're going to play Engage, because its emphasis is on combat. Even all of the side stuff you do outside of battles at your main hub, which is called the Somnio, most of it ties back into combat. Whereas in Three Houses, most of your side stuff was tying into relationships and dating and tea parties and all that kind of stuff. So it really is, combat first, everything else second. And if Fire Emblem's combat's not what pulls you in, I'm not sure Engage is going to be for you. It was fun for me because it was like it was kind of a testing point. Do I like Three Houses? Do I like Fire Emblem? Like, what's my read on this franchise? And yeah, now that I know I love Three Houses social stuff, I know I love Engage's combat, I think I'm just like a Fire Emblem fan.
Now, could you ever see yourself going back and playing the older titles?
I'd love to, but Nintendo doesn't make that super easy, unfortunately.
You don't have a 3DS?
I am so stupid and sold mine back in the day. There was like it haunts me because they are so expensive now. Yeah, it was one of the biggest L's in my gaming career. I don't sell things really anymore at all as far as my gaming stuff goes because of the 3DS. Like, I'm not making that mistake again.
Oh, no. See, the thing that I would always do is I would always buy things that I thought were going to be worth it, like worth a lot of money down the road. Like when Nintendo put out that Wii edition of Super Mario All-Stars, where it was like, all right, it's like a special like anniversary edition of the Super Mario All-Stars bundle. It comes with like an exclusive soundtrack and everything. It's for Wii. I bought 2 of those thinking like, okay, well, this is going to be a collector's edition. And I think maybe it's gone up like $10 in value since then. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'll just hold on to it until that's the money that I need.
Did you do the same thing with the 3D All-Stars? Because I definitely thought that I was going to be sitting on money with that one day.
No, I didn't even buy a physical copy. I just have that digitally.
Oh, nice. But yeah, that stayed in stores for quite a while.
It did. Yeah, I would go to Target and I would still see it like a year after they stopped making it. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is not going to be the collector's edition that I thought it was going to be.
Maybe if it had Galaxy 2.
If only. If only. Come on, Nintendo. And also, while you're at it, give us a Legend of Zelda collection with Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, please.
Okay. That has to be coming. Come on.
Is there anything else you want to say about Fire Emblem Engage?
Let me look through my review here, see if oh, for people who don't have a lineage with Fire Emblem history, but they liked, 3 houses or recent entries, Engage is very clearly using a lot of past Fire Emblem characters and heroes. I don't think you need to worry about not necessarily knowing them. It does a good job of like being hype in those moments. For example, like when Celica appears, I didn't even know who Celica was or what game she was from, but it was a pretty cool moment. And the game leans less into cameo and, nostalgia than I thought it would. At the forefront, those past Fire Emblem characters are there to make combat better. They serve some story purposes, and they do have some very cool, touching moments, and their side missions do tie back into the games that they're from. But at its core, those heroes are there to make the main story battles better. So don't worry if you don't have nostalgia for them. You'll still have a good time, I think.
All right. And if you want to read more of Wesley LeBlanc's impressions and verdict on Fire Emblem Engage, you can do so at GameInformer.com because that game is out now. Woo! As of this release of this episode, that game is available on Switch today. Wes, I've been playing a game that I am decidedly less excited about.
Yeah.
And this is another Switch exclusive. It was a surprise launch at the tail end of 2022. It came maybe the last big game that came out. It was definitely the last big game that came out. December 23rd, we got Sports Story. We talked about it briefly in the first episode, the same way we talked about Fire Emblem Engage. We were both pretty early on in our playthroughs. Now that you finished Fire Emblem Engage and I finished Sports Story, and I don't like this game.
Such a bummer.
Didn't turn out well. I loved Golf Story. Mm-hmm. I thought that was one of the coolest games of the 2017 when Switch first came out. That was a super busy year. I loved Golf Story, and I may have been less or lower on it than Andrew Reiner, who was our reviewer. I think he gave it a 9. I was a little bit lower than that on personally, but it was still a really great game. It was just so much fun, a really fun RPG story. It felt focused. It felt like it was humorous. The writing was smart. The quest lines were engaging. Sports Story just said, "Hey, what if we like made a sequel but didn't have any of those positives?"
God, such a bummer to hear. That's always it always sucks when that happens to sequels.
Yeah, so there's, they added a bunch of different sports, which, I guess we should have seen the writing on the wall for this, but I guess it's been in development for so long that I thought like, okay, well, they really took their time to like hone in on what makes these sports fun. So there's like BMX, there's fishing, there's soccer, baseball, cricket, and of course, like there's golf. Golf is actually still the biggest sport in the game, which is a good thing because that's the only sport that plays well.
Do you think it sounds like they knew that, but that's an interesting choice given that this is Sports Story, not Golf Story 2.
Yeah, so I was most excited to check out tennis. I mean, there's also volleyball, which plays okay, I guess. Tennis is maybe the second most prominent sport, and it's not good. The timing, the placement that you have to have on your swing, it's all way too precise. And this is an overarching story for the entire game. It's just so buggy. It is one of the least polished games I've played in a while.
Wow.
And, it started off with like the writing on the wall for this in particular was very early on in my playthrough. When the game first came out, I was like, okay, I'm going to play this over break. Like, I loved the first game. I'm going to play it again, or I'm going to play this one over the holiday break. And I got about maybe an hour and a half in, and a quest bugged for me. And I was like, okay, well, it probably auto saved and I lost about 45 minutes of progress on that. And I was
Oof.
like, all right, I'm just going to wait until they patch this. I'm not going to play through all these quests again. And I talked about that in the first episode of this year, where I was just like, okay, I've been waiting for them to patch this. They did put out a title update, which gave me a lot of hope. And that's why I continued playing it. And I was like, all right, I'm going to review this for Game Informer and play this whenever I can. And yes, I got through that particular quest without any problems. But this game is still so buggy. Like, talking about tennis in particular, I will be playing a match and I'll hit the ball. It'll land in there. I know the rules of tennis. I used to be a tennis instructor. I played tennis in high school.
Whoa, really?
I
Tennis
know,
instructor Brian.
I know the rules of tennis. And I know when a point should count for me and when it should count for my opponent. I hit it in very clearly, and it gave the point to my opponent. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, and I recorded it. And I was like, did I like miss like where it landed? And I went back and watched the recording on Twitter. I was like, no, that was 100% in. Why did that give it the point? And it was very, very frustrating. And that, plus the fact that you just have to be so precise. You have to like, you have to, like, most games, tennis games, like, think about Mario Tennis. Think about the old school like Virtua Tennis games. They kind of accommodate for the fact that you're not going to be timing it perfectly. Like, they'll add in animations that will make it so that you don't have to be like so perfect, so precise in order to hit the ball. Like, if you hit it a little bit sooner, your shot's not going to be as good, but your character will accommodate for that fact. Like, your character will kind of like take maybe a slightly like sloppier, but like longer approach animation to the ball to hit it. This is not that way. This way, if you like mistime your shot by a little bit, you're going to swing and miss, or you're going to hit it into the net. And okay, that's fine. Like, if you want to be a more precise tennis thing, that is fine. They already require you to be fairly precise with the 3 clicks on the golf backswing meter. But you better make sure that frame rate is consistent. You better make sure there's no stutters in the gameplay, because that happened on multiple occasions for me, where I would go to like, all right, here comes the ball. I'm going to hit the swing. Okay, well, the ball froze in midair, and then by the time it unfroze, I had already pressed the button and swung and missed. Or, all right, the meter's going. I clicked it to start. I'm clicking it for the power, and now here comes. Oh, the gameplay stuttered, and I completely missed the timing for the meter on that. And it's annoying when you're exploring the overworld and the map when that happens, but it's very close to game breaking when it happens when you're like in a timing based situation, and like there's no redos, like there's no mulligans, there's no anything where like, all right, well, the gameplay kind of, the frame rate dropped and screwed me up on this golf shot. Oh, but I'm on hole 7, and now I'm completely screwed because like my entire playthrough is over, basically, because I'm not going to get the score that I wanted, or the birdie medals that I needed, or I was in a pivotal point in this tennis match and now I'm not going to get that. And then so many of the other sports are just so forgettable or relegated to like mini games, like they're not actually like full sports. And all that is, the sports side of the equation. The story side of the equation and the RPG side of it is extremely frustrating as well.
Dang.
It's all fetch quests. It's all tedious conversations. It's all, hey, you give me this thing, and then you give him this thing, and then give him this thing, and then it's like if you give a mouse a cookie type of fetch quest chains, where it's like, all right, I gave this thing, and now I have to give this guy this thing. But it's often so abstract that I would wander for like not hours on each one, but like I felt over the course of my playthrough, I wandered for hours accumulative to try and figure out, all right, who the hell am I supposed to talk to now? What am I supposed to do? Am I even in the right area right now? Like, you have cryptic clues, and then like I would finally figure it out, and more times than not, my response would be, how was I supposed to know to do that?
Yeah,
There's like such poor breadcrumbing and such, I don't know, it just wasn't good design of quests. It wasn't well written dialogue most of the time. There were a few bits that I liked. There were a few funny things that I was like, okay, that was funny. But the success to failure ratio is far worse than it was in Golf Story. Golf Story, I thought the humor was pretty on point. The gameplay was really solid. This is just my headline was unforced errors, or a series of unforced errors. It could have been swing and a miss. It could have been so many other sports allegories, but ultimately, like, the way that I wrapped it up in my review was like, it's just a textbook example of a developer being unable to deliver on lofty ambitions, because they had really strong ambitions in this game. Like, this was a game that obviously they really swung for the fences, to use another sports metaphor here, but they just didn't accomplish hardly anything what they were hoping to do. And like, the golfing stuff was still largely fun, aside from the technical hiccups and everything. Like, the courses are usually pretty fun. Also, there was a glitch where like I would hit a drive I would hit a tee shot, and it would tell me where I was supposed to land. I was like, okay, cool, that's going to land in the fairway. And something about the plane, like it's a top down view, right? Something about it clipped into the environment or something, and like, the ball should have soared over the bunker, but because it like crossed over top the bunker, it actually got stuck. It just, like, the ball immediately sunk into the sand, and I'm like, what the hell happened? Like, that shouldn't have happened. And then another time, like, I was fishing and I went to go cast my line, and when he threw his hand back to cast, my character just levitated into the sky, and I could just break the quest line, because it was like, okay, well, now I don't have to worry about that barricade that was blocking my way, so I can just like run over top of it. And then like it's just a game that is very, very technically I would say unacceptable at this point, even though we're about a month removed from release and it's still this broken. And
so
it was even more broken at launch, which I'm glad they patched that one thing. But yeah, it's
so if they fix all these technical issues, how much better is this game?
Woefully short of the first game.
Mm-hmm. Is it doing anything better than Golf Story?
There's more stuff.
More stuff's not always good sometimes, though.
I don't think you could play tennis in Golf Story.
Yeah.
But like, the dungeons are fine. There's more, like, yeah, it's a bloated, feature crept game, and I wasn't a fan, unfortunately, and I was excited for this. This is one of my most anticipated sequels of 2022.
Yeah. This is something that a lot of people have been. I mean, the first one came out around Switch's launch, and then seems like this one's coming out near the end of the Switch's life cycle and just a dud.
Yeah. You think they would have known to, like, how to better work with the technology with, an additional 6 years or 5 years under their belts. But it sounds like if that development room that we talked about last time you were on is any indication, it sounds like this was kind of a tumultuous development cycle for this game, and it definitely shows in the final product, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some reporters out there like Jason Schreier types that are looking into that room specifically, because as we talked about in the last episode, it's just close enough to being like, it is funny, but also is it developers telling people something, And
the fact that it's a secret room leads me to believe that it's maybe something that they didn't want management to find.
Yep.
But yeah, Sports Story, it's out now if you do want to check it out in spite of my criticisms. I wish that there were more good things to say about it, because I really wanted to like this game, and it's just, the more I played it, the more I didn't like it. Also, the story was a complete dud as well, unfortunately. So it didn't I had no investment whatsoever by the time I rolled credits. But Wes, I do want to wrap up today's main segment talking about a few other games I've been checking out on Switch. We don't have to do deep dives on any of these, but I played Lil Gator Game. That's a review that I jumped into immediately upon finishing Sports Story's review. And this game came out December 12th for both Steam and Switch, but I finally got around to playing all the way through it this week. We've talked about it in the past on the eShop Gems of the Year, when I had Jill Grote on to kind of run down her favorite indie titles of the year. So we don't have to go super in depth with this. However, there's just a lot of charm to this game. It's one of those games that it takes direct inspiration from Legend of Zelda. I would say more Breath of the Wild than any other entry, but it definitely takes full-on Zelda inspiration. And it's a wholesome game. You can't really get damage. There's no fall damage. The enemies are all made out of cardboard, so you're running around and like slashing these enemies, and it's just a really cute, wholesome game. It only took me about 4 or 5 hours to complete, and I really enjoyed it. Have you had any chance to like look at what this game is about?
No, but my first exposure to it, I'd seen like a tweet or two about it, I think. But other than hearing it on this podcast, and I think Jill is mostly the one I'd been seeing tweet about it. Your review was like the first in-depth thing I had seen or read about it, and it sounds like a game I really, really want to check out. I love the idea of a game that plays into like the sentimentality of being a child and imagination and all that. Sounds like right up my alley.
And it is a very touching story about, I won't spoil too much because, again, it's a very short game. So there's not a lot of ways to talk around it without kind of talking directly about the stuff that happens. But like it's about kind of balancing the portions of your life as you become more responsible, as your life changes. And that really hit home for me because, there's always those things that like, it's like that tweet where it's like, one day you went out with your friends to play outside for the last time, but none of you knew it was going to be the last time. That's almost what this like touches on the themes of. And that is something that really hits home for me. And I loved kind of the meditations on it and the exploration of it, even though it's done so in kind of a cute, happy-go-lucky way. The story is so touching. It's sentimental, and it's just a really wholesome experience. And I very much recommend it. It's kind of a laid-back Zelda-like title. And the way I put it in my review is it's not the best Zelda-like game I've ever played, but it's probably the one that'll stick with me for the longest. And, I liked it a lot. I highly recommend you checking it out. Like I said, it came out December 12th for both Steam and Switch, and it's just really a fun game to play through. And the exploration is kind of the main part of it. And it's all about basically, I'll tell the premise of the story, I guess, where it's like the main character, who by default is named Gator, but you can name him whatever you want. He wants to get his big sis, who's home from college, to kind of do like this live action role playing that they used to do when they were kids together one more time. And she's too busy with this assignment from college. So he's trying to put together this giant, play session with all of your friends in the local playground. And like you have to recruit your friends to kind of renovate the playground, make it look like a castle town kind of deal, and hopeful that this will be the way that you kind of entice your sister to put down her laptop and come over and play with you one more time. And it's just it's a lot of fun to go around and interact with all the animals, anthropomorphic animals across the island, and get them to like recruit them to your cause. And as you get more friends to join your team, you can do more renovations. And there's a few main quest lines you have to do to kind of progress the renovations. But like, the more friends you have, the better the play session is going to be. So you want to have as many people as possible. So Lil Gator Game out now. Very much recommended, especially if you're looking for something sweet and cute and short above all else.
Love that.
And then the two other ones that I just wanted to touch on real quick, they kind of go hand in hand here. Persona 3 Portable and Persona 4 Golden are both available today on Switch, finally. And, Persona 5 Royal came out last year on Switch. I love that game so very much. It's probably one of my top 10 games of all time. It's one of my top 2 RPGs ever made. It's like behind Final Fantasy X for me. And Persona 5 is just, a game I adore with my entire heart. Persona 4 I like a little bit less, but I also enjoy it very much. I've never played Persona 3, so I'm excited to finally have like an excuse to go and play it because it's available on modern systems for the first time ever. Or I guess it was available on modern systems when it first came out, but for the first time ever since I got into the Persona series. But Persona 3 Portable, Persona 4 Golden available today. Persona 3 came out in the US on PS2 in 2007. Then it was re-released as Persona 3 FES in 2008. Then it was ported to PSP as Persona 3 Portable in 2010. And that version is what we got on PS4, Xbox, PC, and of course, Switch as of today. And then Persona 4 came out in 2008 on PS2, ported to Vita in 2012 as Persona 4 Golden. And now that is the version that they brought to PS4, Xbox, PC, and Switch today. I know it was on PC already, but it's on PS4, Xbox, and Switch as of today. And, I played a little bit of both of these games. Persona 4 Golden looks very good up on the screen. You can tell this is a newer game.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's a Vita version or the Vita game that they ported over, they did a good job of making it look good up on a big screen. And it looks polished. It plays well. The music absolutely slaps to this day. And I'm excited to dive back into this game. It's a long game. I think this one, Persona 4 or Persona 5, I think is like 120 hours, 130 hours, something like that.
Yeah.
Persona 4 is slightly shorter than that at like 90 hours. Persona 3 Portable is even shorter than that, which, it's still a long game. It's still like 65 hours for Persona 3. But it's it's decidedly, or it's very obviously an older game. You go into this and you're like, oh yeah, this is a port of a portable game from 2010 brought over. The cutscenes, as they were in Persona 3 Portable on PSP, just almost non-existent. They're very much just kind of like static images instead of actual cutscenes. Whereas the Vita Persona 4 Golden, it has like the full like anime style cutscenes and everything. But I don't know how much I'm going to like Persona 3 Portable, just because it's hard to go backwards on a game like this. Whereas you look at something like Persona 5 Royal, it's like, oh my God, this game is gorgeous, striking visual style and everything. And it seemed like they, while a lot of people will say Persona 3 Portable is arguably the best version of this game, it's hard to make some of the concessions that they made, making it a portable thing. It almost makes me wish that they made some sort of like amalgamation of Persona 3 FES and Persona 3 Portable to bring the best of both worlds into this, if they're going to bring it to modern systems. Still, it's almost like one of those things with like Sonic Origins, where they put those out and it's like, all right, well, we don't have these 3 songs from Sonic 3. It's like, all right, well, if that's the concession I have to make to finally get Sonic 3 on modern consoles, then that's the concession I'll make. But still, I don't have to like it. That's the way I feel about Persona 3 coming to modern systems finally. It's like, I wish that we had like some of the stuff of the PS2 version, and then some of the quality of life stuff they did for Persona 3 Portable, all in this kind of one perfect storm version of it. And like, I'll even pay a little bit more for it, but it seems like that was never on the table. So if this is the version that we're going to get, and that's either this or nothing, then I'll take it. But it's like, what could have been?
Yeah, I do see a lot of Persona sickos out there. I haven't really looked into it and don't have any inclination either way, but I've seen a lot of people say that they like, people think Atlas is working on a Persona 3 remake of some kind.
I've heard that for years.
Yeah, that's the thing. But so maybe that's why they were fine putting out this portable version if they have a super nice version coming out. It was me and Kyle did an NGT of Persona 3. If you're curious to check it out, it's on our Game Informer YouTube. It blew my mind that you don't like walk around freely in the world. You walk around in the dungeons, but in the world, you're just kind of clicking to go places.
Persona has always had kind of like this visual novel style to it.
Yeah.
This, because you're not walking around in the world, is even more so in that vein, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Persona 4 and Persona 5, you actively are running around in the world and everything. And Persona 3 Portable in particular, like the other Persona 3s, I believe you do walk around in the world. This one, in the name of streamlining it for portable, got rid of that. So that's why I wish that, we kind of had a combination of the PS2 and the PSP version to try to make like a better version. And I question that speculation that the Persona fans are doing, because maybe I'm just too much in like the Nintendo brain, where it's like, oh, they don't want to like cannibalize stuff. If they were going to put out a Persona 3 remake, which I hope they do, I really hope they do, why would they put out a Persona 3 portable remaster? Like, people play Persona 3 in 2023, and then in 2024, say they announce Persona 3 remake. It's like, okay, well, I just played that, though. I'm good.
I feel like Persona fans, kind of similar to Nier fans, if a game comes out in that series, they buy it on all the platforms eventually.
That's fair.
Persona 5 Royal, I know people who have it on Xbox, Switch, PC, and PlayStation. And they strike me. Yeah, there you go. They strike me as the kind of people that would be fine to at least own Persona 3 Portable, maybe not complete it, and then also buy the remake next year, if that came out next year or whenever,
Yeah, I think that it is, I don't know. I feel like a company, though, would look at that and say, oh, we shouldn't do this because that'll weaken the sales of the bigger project that we're doing.
Yeah,
And I worry that or either that or we're multiple years away and people will get like kind of their taste here. This is like their appetizer to like the full. Again, I hope it happens. They have higher res assets from the Persona 3 dancing game that they put out a few years ago. So like they have these characters in high res assets, and I'm assuming
true.
some of the environments. But they also have the same thing for Persona 4, and this is what they gave us for that. But Persona 4 Golden, I think, might be a better game to play through in 2020 or 2023. Geez, than Persona 3 Portable. But I'm gonna give Persona 3 Portable the old try because that's the one of the three like kind of modern era Persona games that I've never played because it just hasn't been available to me since I got into the series back in 2017. But I'm glad it's finally here. I went back and played Persona 4 Golden through PlayStation TV, and I was always jealous that a version came to PC that was like higher resolution graphics. And now we have that version on Switch, and it looks good in action. I will say that. So I am glad these games are here. I just wish that maybe there was a little bit more modernization in the Persona 3 release that we got. That said, I'm fully happy. I'm fully happy, and I hope that we continue to get these games that we've all wanted on Switch for so long. I mean, 2022 was really the year that we got so many games that we've been wanting for Switch finally coming to Switch.
Yeah.
And I did that a category in my end of year awards, and at the end of 2021 I had so many games I was like most wanted for Switch. Almost all of them came to Switch over the course of 2022. So now 2023 it was kind of a more challenging category to fill out. So I'm happy for that. But yeah, I'm excited to keep playing Persona 3 Portable. I am kind of interested in replaying Persona 4 Golden now that like it looks better up on a big screen. It's not the Vita version that I'm blowing up to be on a 50-inch TV or however big my TV is. And yeah, so those are all the main games we wanted to talk about on this episode. We are going to take the final break of this episode, and when we get back, we'll do definitive ranking and get Wesley's eShop Gem of the Week. We will be right back. We are back, and it's time for Definitive Ranking, a recurring segment where we take a Nintendo topic and give our personal top 5 lists. Since you spent this main segment talking about a series that you got into a little later than you probably would have wanted, now sounds like a good time to get your top 5 franchises you wish you got into earlier, Wesley. So start with 5, count it down to 1, give me a sentence or two about each.
So number 5 is not really a franchise yet, but I hope it is. It is Ring Fit Adventure. I bought that game when it came out, which was, I don't know, 2018, 2019. I don't know. It was like a golden chest to have during the pandemic.
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of a game that you bought and that was skyrocketed in value.
Yeah, and I held on to it because I was like, man, what does it say about me if I bought Ring Fit to work out with it and then sold it for money, like double the price? But I held out, and this year I finally started it. I'm about 2 weeks into it, 8 days total of Ring Fit. I do 2 days of working out and then a day off. And man, it is such a cool product. It is, I love Nintendo for doing things like this. It is a well-rounded, like kind of not CrossFit-y, but very cardio intensive, high intensity, high rep workout program. And as someone who never really sticks to workouts just because I cherish a lot of my time, and obviously working out is not like fun, mixing those things with a video game, an RPG, has done wonders for me, and I love it. I've been sticking to it. You know, we're only 2 weeks in, so we'll check back in soon, but I'm planning to stick with it for the long haul. This I'm really enjoying it, and I hope that it turns into a franchise and follows whatever console's next for Nintendo.
I also have a Ring Fit Adventure, and I've never used it.
You should give it a go. It's a fun time.
But really, can you put a price on your health?
I could. I feel like
yeah. Probably. I mean, look at insurance companies; they do it every day. All right, number 4.
My number 4 is Pikmin. My best friend, he loves the Pikmin series. I legitimately think he's the number 1 Pikmin fan in the world. And I finally started this series last year. I've known him for 12 years, and he's always been like, "When are you going to play Pikmin? When are you going to play Pikmin?" And I finally started it last year. I started with 3 on Switch, just because, the deluxe edition of Pikmin 3 was a nice release and I loved it. And then towards the end of the year, we had what we called Pixanite, which is where he brought his Wii over to my house and I played the first Pikmin in one go. We ordered a bunch of pizza. He made us some beverages that was like the juice, from the Pikmin series, the fruit juice and all that.
Mm-hmm.
We made a whole theme night out of it, and he watched me beat Pikmin in one go. And we're planning to do the same for Pikmin 2, not in one go, because that's like a 20-hour game, but we're planning to do the same for Pikmin 2 soon. I love this series. It's so weird and different to any other game out there, and I'm so happy that Pikmin 4 is finally a real thing.
Yeah, it's supposed to come this year.
Supposed to, yeah.
That's a series I need to get into. This isn't even like it's not an entry on my list just because it's like these are ones we've gotten into too late. I just have yet to get into Pikmin.
It's really good. It suffers from Nintendo's problem of, it's not easy to play them all because you have to have a Wii or a GameCube. Or actually, no, Wii U too. You could have a Wii U as well. Yeah, that's right.
But it's also they brought Pikmin 3 forward for Switch.
Yes, they did. And it's a nice release. I've heard the multiplayer part of it's really fun too, and it's very pretty. I hope they bring 1 and 2 over ahead of 4 so that people can play the full trilogy easily on Switch.
I think that's going to be one of those things where Nintendo doesn't do that just because, like, it's the reason that I asked. I mean, this could have been a very this could be an outdated thought process, but like Nintendo's impossible to figure out sometimes. But like I remember I asked on a media tour one time. They were showing me A Link Between Worlds on 3DS, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's like a successor to A Link to the Past." And I was like, "Well, have you thought about like putting A Link to the Past on 3DS before A Link Between Worlds come out, so people can play that version and then play this game?" And they're like, "Oh, well, then this person probably doesn't even work for Nintendo anymore. This was a PR person." They go, "Oh well, like they probably wouldn't do that because they don't want to like cannibalize the sales of A Link Between Worlds." And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense.
Fans. Yeah, that doesn't. If anything, it would boost the sales because people who,
So I don't know if that thought process was just one person speculating or if it was like this is like a thought that Nintendo has in general. Like, let's not put the older games on like any time around. Like, if they put Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD out today on Switch, I don't think that would cannibalize Tears of the Kingdom sales whatsoever.
Not at all. Wouldn't even touch them.
So I think that they should just do it. It's the second time I've pleaded for that to happen this episode. All right, Wesley, number 3.
Metroid. So this one's kind of wild because, I've been writing in the industry and freelancing and then full-time at Game Informer since 2016, 2017. And, a term you hear all the time is Metroidvania. I'd played Castlevania, so I truly understood the Vania part, but the Metroid part was always kind of a mystery to me. And weirdly enough, Metroid Dread was the first Metroid I rolled credits on. And I loved it. I ate it up. One of my favorite games last year, and I've since gone back and played Super Metroid. I did not finish Metroid, but because I just got too antsy and wanted to jump to Super Metroid. But I probably should finish Metroid one day. The Prime series I have not been able to get after or any of the other releases, but Metroid's like a Nintendo franchise that is day one for me now, I think.
And that's another, like, we know Metroid Prime 4 is coming at some point.
Yeah.
They need to put the Metroid Prime trilogy on Switch. It's been long enough. And especially since we've never seen like a second of gameplay of Metroid Prime 4, it's far enough away that Nintendo's concerns of cannibalizing the new version, seemingly it would give people enough time to play through the first 3 if they've never done so, or replaying it to kind of get the excitement back up for the series.
I worry that they're just going to release like 3 instead of the full trilogy, kind of like they did with Pikmin, but we'll see. I'm still so shocked that is not that trilogy and Wind Waker and Twilight Princess not being on Switch still is probably the strangest Nintendo decision to me this generation.
It's sad. And
truly.
I'm playing Majora's Mask right now for the first time, by the way.
Ooh.
And it's like, oh my God, it's still so much fun to play those N64 era Zelda games.
Yeah.
That, like, I I've been beating the drum of like, I wish we had the 3DS versions of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, but the N64 version, though it definitely is lacking in some of the quality of life improvements of the 3DS versions, they still slap. They still slap.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just give us Wind Waker Twilight Princess HD. That's all we're saying. That's the third request. All right, number 2.
Number 2 is Super Smash Bros.
Wow. You didn't get into that early?
I kind of played some of Brawl on Wii, but I don't think I ever played a single multiplayer match with people, like friends in a room or anything like that. I played the Subspace Emissary, and that's what Super Smash Bros was for me.
Weird.
Until Smash Bros for Wii U came out. And that's the one where like me and the friends on, a Friday night, we would get together and we would play Smash Bros for like 6 hours, and I'd be going home at 2 a.m. And I have such fond memories of the Wii version of Smash Bros because of that. We did the same with Ultimate as well. And so I'm like fully in on Smash Bros now. But I do get so bummed when they talk about like 64 and Melee especially, and I just have no touchstone for those, especially Melee. Like that's still one of the that's one of the highest regarded in the series, probably next to Ultimate. There's still like competitive matches happening for that. That's still the Smash Bros people play, and I just haven't played it. And I wish that I had played those series, growing up through my Nintendo consoles.
Well, the problem with Smash 64 is that it laid the all-important foundation, and I loved Smash 64, but in the time since it came out, the series has evolved, and other games just do literally everything that game does better.
Yeah.
There's no reason to go back to Smash 64 because we have Smash Ultimate that does everything that game does, but exponentially better.
Yep.
And I love that game, and I love Melee, and the Wii version I liked a little bit less, but like Ultimate is really the only version you need of Super Smash Brothers at this point, I think.
I agree 100%.
And what's your number 1?
My number 1, which no surprise here, is Fire Emblem. I think Three Houses and Engage are some of my favorite Switch games ever. I didn't touch one. I didn't even look into playing one throughout the DS, the Game Boy. Well, I don't know if the Game Boy ones came here. 3DS era, like Awakening, Fates, all those, never even thought about picking them up. And I'm so bummed I didn't, because I do think I would have loved them, because if Engage and Three Houses speak to anything, then yeah. No surprise there, but Fire Emblem is a series that I never thought I would love, and it's one of my favorite Nintendo franchises now.
Well, I'm glad you were able to discover that through the Switch.
Thank you, Switch.
So I'm going to run down mine pretty quick. Number 5 for me is Fire Emblem, because I didn't get into the Fire Emblem franchise until Awakening, and I know there's like all this rich history before that. Mm-hmm. And it seems like it's one of those franchises that might be difficult to go backwards on.
Yeah.
Just because of all the modernizations. And I didn't keep up. I didn't play Fates, and I didn't play too much of Three Houses. So it's just one of those series I wish I just maybe not got in, maybe a combination of got into earlier and have spent more time playing, like in general. So that's my number 5. Number 4, this is an interesting one. Yoshi.
Oh, okay.
So Super Mario World, the first one, is my all-time favorite platformer.
Yeah,
I think it's the best platformer that's ever been created. I know there's a lot of people who prefer Super Mario Brothers 3. I think World does everything that 3 does, just
3D,
a little bit better.
Super Mario 3D World too. Don't forget.
Super Mario 3D World is a good game, but not a Super Mario World level game.
Some people disagree.
Naturally, I should have been like all over Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island, but I didn't play it back on the SNES.
Oh.
My introduction to the Yoshi franchise was Yoshi's Story on N64, which is still very early on in the Yoshi franchise.
Yeah.
But it's like my first one, that was like the second entry in the Yoshi franchise, I think. And I just remember being like, oh, this is not great.
Yeah.
I guess these Yoshi games just aren't good. And then, eventually I did go back and play Yoshi's Island on SNES, and I was like, okay, this actually is amazing.
Yeah. That's funny you missed the arguably one of Nintendo's best games ever in favor of Yoshi World.
Yeah, or Yoshi's Story.
Yoshi's Story, yeah, sorry.
But yeah, I wish I would have gotten into the Yoshi franchise through Yoshi's Island instead of Yoshi's Story. But number 3, Pilot Wings, and I still haven't played that much of Pilot Wings, but I played it late enough that it wasn't the mind-blowing experience that I'm sure it was playing it on SNES or N64.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if I had played them back in the day, I would have enjoyed them a lot more.
Do you think we ever see Pilot Wings again, like in a new entry?
I think eventually they might. I mean, but I say that about all of them. It's like, how have we not gotten a new F-Zero game
Oof, yeah.
when, I know Nintendo doesn't want to maybe cannibalize the Mario Kart franchise, but what more could they do with the Mario Kart franchise at this point?
Yeah.
Like with the popularization of Captain Falcon through the Super Smash Brothers series, why has the F-Zero franchise not come back in some way? Even if it's not even a racing game, like redo it as like a third person action game. I don't know.
Or
Falcon
beat
Punch
'em
is one
up.
of the most iconic moves of any video game ever at this point.
Yeah.
And here we are just sitting on it, like sitting on this franchise that would have an entirely new fan base. There's even fan-esque style games where it's like Fast Racing Neo or Fast Racing RMX. Like those games are very clearly inspired by the F-Zero franchise. I just assume it's something that they don't know how to capitalize on it, unfortunately. But Pilot Wings, I think, is maybe slightly less likely than the F-Zero franchise to get a new entry, but I still think it's a possibility, especially as they dig into like, all right, what franchises could we really like revitalize? Like I think Pilot Wings and F-Zero should be near the top of that list. Number 2 and number 1 go hand in hand for me. I'll just say number 2 is Persona, because as I mentioned, like Persona 5 was my first Persona game. And I went back and played Persona 4 Gold, and I liked it a lot, but it was like, okay, yeah, it's hard to kind of go backwards in this. And then Persona 3 Portable is looking like a very daunting task for me to go back to, just because of all the quality of life stuff that 4 Golden and 5 introduced into the series. It's like, okay, without all that stuff, it might be tricky to go back to. But I think that if I played Persona 3 when it first came out, I would have a much higher appreciation for it than I could ever possibly get playing that game in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
So that segues directly into my number 1, which is Final Fantasy.
Ooh.
Final Fantasy X, which is my favorite RPG of all time, was my first Final Fantasy game.
Whoa, really? I mean, that checks out. That's a lot of people's firsts. That's interesting, though.
So I've gone back and I've played some of the other ones, and I just don't like them as much. And I think that if I started with 7, or I started with 6, or I started with 4, as they're numbered now, I would like it. I would like those games so much more than just like, all right, I'm going back now as a historical curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, I just wish that I had that historical perspective, but I didn't really play RPGs as a kid. Like my first RPG was Pokemon Red and Blue. And, I just completely missed the entire like golden age of SNES RPGs. And I'm bummed about that. And I wish that I had that historical perspective more so than just going back in modern day and playing it as this retro game that people say is one of the greatest RPGs of all time. In particular, I'll say Final Fantasy VI is one that I wish I had played back in the day and had my dumb little kid mind completely blown by.
Yeah, but those are. I wonder if the pixel remasters maybe are what you're looking for.
That is what I'm looking forward to this year. I'm excited that those are coming to Switch. But yeah, that's my list. And Wesley, that leaves us one final segment, the eShop Gem of the Week. What is your pick for this week?
The eShop Gem of the Week is, I believe, the first game I reviewed for Game Informer back in February of last year. And it is Infernax, which is a 8-bit, I don't want to say, it's not really a Metroidvania, but it is heavily inspired by Castlevania 2 and just retro games of those kinds. And it is very gory, very dark. Like it's lots of, the little devil symbols everywhere. Like it's diving into all that stuff. It's horror based, I'd say. And, but the combat is a lot of fun. Very Castlevania too. The characters, it's all over the top. It's really just like a good retro time. It's not doing anything, incredibly memorable. And it didn't really crack like my top 10 last year, but it is a game that I really, really enjoyed playing on Switch. And if you like the retro games where, you're kind of doing a little bit of platforming, a lot of combat, and just, stories kind of somewhere in the background, it's one worth checking out for sure.
Yeah, I remember this got quite a bit of buzz when it first came out.
Yeah.
And, it has a very striking, like retro style aesthetic to it. And, it came out last year. It's only $20. So it's one that
well worth it.
If this seems like it's up your alley, then, Wesley's endorsement would tell you that it's worth it. It came out on Valentine's Day, I'm seeing, last year.
It's a perfect Valentine's Day game.
Well, hey, I mean, I'm looking at one of the shopkeepers saying, let me know if you desire any of my wares. That could be something you say in Valentine's Day, I guess.
That's true, yeah.
All right. Well, Wesley, thank you so much for joining me for this episode, talking
Yeah.
about Fire Emblem Engage, talking about Sports Story, and so many other games. So I appreciate you coming on for a second time already in 2023.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
And thank you so much to everyone for listening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, throw All Things Nintendo a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button. If you want to get any questions or comments in, you can get in touch with me at allthingsnintendo@gameinformer.com or hit me up on Instagram at Brian P. Shea. And as always, you can join the Game Informer Community Discord, which is a perk for subscribing to our Twitch channel, even just for 1 month. Wes, tell everyone where they can find you on the internet.
You can find me on Twitter at LeBlancWest, or you can find most of my work on, well, all of my work on GameInformer.com and Game Informer's YouTube channel.
That is our show for this week. Thank you all again for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time.